Hey everyone, I'm going to take a little bit of time to go over the song that we discussed in last week's discussion. If you remember, that song was Lose Yourself by Eminem. All right. So one of the questions I believe that you were asked in the discussion is to look at, think about what is the moment that he is talking about, especially in the first part of the song, the intro and the first verse. And then you were asked to look for some poetic elements, imagery, simile and metaphor, and rhyme. Right? So let's go ahead and bring the song up. Okay. So first of all, he starts off with, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? So one moment. What is that moment? Well, when you go through the first verse, well, first of all, if you have seen the movie 8 Mile, then you already know what the moment is. But if you haven't seen the movie, maybe you figured it out after reading the first verse. Yo, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. He's nervous, but on the surface, he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. But he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud, he opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's choking how everybody's joking now. The clock runs out. Time's up, over, blow. Snap back to reality. Oh, here goes gravity. Oh, there goes rabbit. He choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy. No, he won't have it. He knows his whole back's to these ropes. It don't matter, he's dope. He knows that, but he's broke. He's so stagnant, he knows when he goes back to his mobile home, that's when it's back to the lab again. This whole rhapsody, better go capture this moment and hope it don't pass him. So what we kind of get from that is he's in front of a crowd and he's very nervous, and if you kind of pick up on some of those phrases that he's used, he's essentially performing in a rap battle. Okay. And one of the big reasons I chose this song as opposed to other Eminem songs is because of that battle. So rap battle, for those who may not know, it's usually, I don't want to say it's totally freestyle, but because obviously he has things written down and he has forgotten them. So there's, a certain amount of preparation involved. But it's just two guys rapping and the audience deciding who did a better job, essentially. It's pretty intense. And it's a big thing. It's a big deal. But I chose it because of that battle. There are tons of other Eminem songs that I personally love that still incorporate elements of poetry. One that I used to use was No Love with him and Lil Wayne, because Lil Wayne does the first verse of that song and it is nothing but poetry. It's astounding, actually. It's quite beautiful in ways, but it's also, there's a lot of language. There are some vulgar moments in that song. So I don't like to use it in an online setting. I usually prefer to do that one only if I'm teaching at a class at a school where we do in-person classes. I've also used Love the Way You Lie with Em and Rihanna. That's got a lot of nice similes and metaphors in it. And then there's just a ton of other Em songs that, have so many poetic elements in them. But this one also has a rap battle involved. Why would I want to choose the song with the rap battle involved? Well, that is because it relates to poetry. in a way that I think many people don't realize. And that is, if you look at, I mean, we've already looked at poetry. We've looked at persona and tone and figurative language, and not only with actual poems, in weeks 2 and 3, but then in the song lyrics that we've been discussing as well. And the other thing about poetry, though, that we haven't really talked about yet is the origins of poetry. Poetry predates written communication. Therefore, poetry was a spoken word art form. It was meant to be spoken aloud. It was meant to be heard. It was meant to be shared. Right? So I think that's a way in which poetry and music share a different type of similarity, in that originally poetry was an oral tradition. We kind of think of poetry now as being something way more personal, and sure, some poets become famous and their works get shared, but I think when we often think about just your everyday person writing poetry, we think of it as a private thing. But that's not where poetry began. Poetry began as something that was intentionally spoken to others, right? Just like music is. So let's take that idea of poetry being a written thing now, but an oral tradition originally. Let's think about the 80s, 1980s. We have this explosion of hip hop and rap music. They've both evolved, tremendously since then. But the 80s is really when they both kind of came up and made their marks. Also in the 80s, we had something called slam poetry developing. So it starts in Chicago by a construction worker named Mark Kelly Smith. And essentially, he was a poet who liked poetry, kind of going against stereotypes there. Wouldn't expect it from a construction worker, but nonetheless, he starts this movement where people gather in public places like a coffee house or a bookstore or a park. And these people come prepared with their own poetry. And it's almost like an open mic night for poets. So each person gets up and speaks, recites their poetry. Maybe they have it written down in front of them. A lot of them, though, have it memorized. It's almost like a performance piece. But it was also a competition. There would be members of the audience who would score each poet. There's rules and all that, whatever. We're not really worried about the details of it. But at the end, the scores would reveal a winner. So there's a lot of audience participation in these slam poetry events. And it's basically like a poetry battle. All right. So very similar to rap battles, especially this idea of the audience being active participants and it being a competition. There are other similarities between rap music and hip hop and poetry, especially slam poetry, that we will discuss a little more in this week's discussion and next week's journal. But for this week, I just want to kind of focus on that similarity in terms of just slam poetry and rap battle. Just a basic idea here of how they share that similarity of both audience participation and the idea of it being a competition, and the audience helps determine the winner. All right. So this song is like it's the whole catalyst for Lose Yourself is a rap battle, but it's also bringing in a lot of poetry in the lyrics. So it is like this mesh, this perfect example of slam poetry and rap battling, this poetry and music. All right. It references a specific moment in the rap battle, but you know, I do think that the message is relatable. The theme of this song, you know, seizing that opportunity and not letting it pass you by. You know, I'm not a rapper, obviously. But I can relate to this message. It still speaks to me, you know, very strongly. So the moment in this song is both specific and vague, right? It has a specific context. You can tell exactly what this moment is for this person. But I could still relate to this song in a moment for myself that is completely unrelated to a rap battle, right? So I like that about the song a lot. It's definitely a kind of get yourself pumped up kind of song. Let's look at the poetic elements that you were asked to identify. First was imagery. I think the best imagery is probably the first two lines of that first verse. Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. He also gives a lot of sort of like auditory imagery. Let's see. He keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud. The clock runs out, time's up, over, blow. He gives us descriptions of a mobile home. This idea here of his holes escaping through this hole that is gaping. Let's see. It only grows harder, only grows hotter. You know, there goes the cold water, the beat goes on. There's a lot of kinetic, you know, like movement and auditory imagery that he uses throughout the song. I won't say that this song is one that is like overflowing with imagery per se, but it's in there. I think where we get the best poetic elements is when it comes to the metaphors and similes and the rhyme. You know, he comes all the way back up here. He's calm and ready to drop bombs. Obviously, he's not literally dropping bombs. Definitely a metaphor. There goes gravity. Clearly, he's not weightless. That is also a metaphor. Goes back to the lab again. He's not going back to an actual literal lab. Definitely a metaphor. Here's your chance to blow. Obviously, that's a metaphor. That whole, his soul's escaping through the hole that is gaping. That is a metaphor. Where he says he's cold product down here. Metaphor. He's been chewed up and spit out and booed off stage. Meaning hasn't literally been chewed up and spit out. He has been booed off stage, but not chewed up and spit out. Where does it get down here? I think oh yeah. Tear this mother effing roof off like two dogs caged. Oh yeah. Another day of monotony's gotten me to the point I'm like a snail. I've got to formulate a plot, end up in jail or shot. Like a snail. This one here, this is pretty cool. This is, I don't know if it might really fall under the category of illusion rather than simile or metaphor, but where he says, Mom, I love you, but this trailer's got to go. I cannot grow old in Salem's Lot. You know, Salem's Lot was a book by Stephen King. It's about vampires, town of vampires. Interesting. The rhyme, though, oh my gosh, you know, we've learned that poetry doesn't have to rhyme. A lot of it does. It does not have to. Song lyrics typically do, but like Eminem takes that to a, you know, way bigger level. Because you know when M goes for a rhyme, he doesn't just like to place it at the end of each line. He will look to place it like 50 times in 5 lines of text. Beginning, middle, end, it doesn't matter. Like, oh gosh. So his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. He's nervous, but on the surface, he looks calm and ready. I mean, just in those 3 lines, he's got like, I don't know, 7, 8 rhymes there. And he's just like that, the whole thing. And what is so interesting about his rhymes is that they do come in unexpected places and in unexpected ways. They are not just at the end of every line, they are in the middle of lines, and they go through numerous lines. I think the best is probably in the 3rd verse. He has some crazy rhymes in here. Pied Piper, and then come down to Mackay Pfeiffer. It's getting even harder trying to feed and water my seed, plus teeter totter, caught up being a father and a prima donna, baby mama drama, screaming on her too much. The rhyme is spectacular. A lot of people kind of using the word salad and just like coming up with rhymes for no reason. And I think he does that in some songs, just to kind of poke at those people. But I mean, there's so many of his songs where, yeah, the rhyme is crazy and it sounds like word salad sometimes, but a lot of times it makes perfect sense. He just comes up with these rhymes that are crazy. So the rhyme in his music is so very poetic. But the best takeaway of this is just the connection between rap battling and slam poetry and what it says about art forms of hip hop and rap that often don't get the credit that they deserve. They're often seen as not having any value. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I think that hip hop and rap are about as close to poetry as any music genre can get, especially when you think about the origins of poetry. When you think about the evolution of slam poetry, the connection is deep. This week's discussion, we're going to look at someone who tests those ideas even more, the connection between hip hop and rap and poetry. Even more than Eminem does, because M is good. But this week's discussion is Tupac. And next week's discussion, so this week's discussion is a Tupac song. Next week's discussion, you'll actually look at a Tupac poem. It's great. So keep thinking about slam poetry. We're going to see how Tupac takes it even further, more than just the poetic elements, sort of the whole purpose behind slam poetry. Tupac thing. But this song too, think about how it shows us that connection between slam poetry and rap battling, how it shows us that the connections between music and poetry go even deeper, and how hip hop and rap in particular really embody a lot of poetry. All right. So anyway, go ahead and answer the questions. If you have questions of your own, feel free to reach out to me. If you have more, if you have your own thoughts on any of this, add it to the journal. It doesn't have to just be those 3 questions, but definitely answer those 3 questions, and reach out if you run into any issues.